Hi everybody, I've got the wonderful Reverend David Parry with me here again today. Thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about the mystery of the word. And I wanted to start off with saying most of the creation myths that we know in various religions and faiths talk about the world was created with a word or a letter, or was spoken. So I was saying to David, what is this mystery of the word? Where do we take it from there? Well, I'm going to ask David, is God the word? You're on mute, so over to you. You have to unmute yourself.
I didn't want to shorten the mutual giggling. Wait, right. Let's start with a quote from Wordy Rapping Hood, one of my favourite rappers. You know, eat your words, but don't go hungry. Words have always nearly hung me. So that's from the wordsmith's mouth. Oh yeah, I mean, you know, in my day, when you did theology, I mean, I did at university, I did this sort of weird, because you could do that in those days, this weird amalgam of philosophy and theology, which I'm very proud I did because it opened up so many worlds, you know. But I remember us doing Hebrew as it would have been biblically, which is just a total pain in the arse, and Greek as it was written, which of course wasn't the Greek of the philosophers. You know, it's Koine Greek, the Greek of the common man, the marketplace. And I remember to this day, someone going on at the front of the class, in arche en hologos, with me thinking, oh God, I bet they didn't say it like that, but not wanting to come out and be the pain in the arse of my normal job. That was my normal job in those classes. And it just sounded so lovely, but it also sounded so obscure. And what they didn't want to do was say there's these whole rafts of philosophy behind what that might mean. You know, including whether it was a word in any sense that we'd understand or not. Was it some type of archetype, or was it some type of vibration? I mean, certainly most of the creation myths do end up, curiously, with a common denominator, whereby vibration, you know, an original rumbling in the aether, rumbling in the void, dare I say, you know, somehow increases and magnifies and amplifies itself into something so devastatingly powerful that the whole of creation is started. So in a sense, everything is a part of the word. Everything is the word. I mean, certainly in the Judeo-Christian stream, it's unique, but it's not unique. It's unique, but it's not unique. It's unique, but it's not unique. It depends what you mean by that. You know, I mean, certainly if we look, right, let's go, because you and I are into Hinduism. You know, if we look, say, at the Bhagavan, Krishna, who is a direct analogue of what we mean by the God concept, that isn't trivial. That's very important. We've got to all know what we're talking about and what we're comparing. Someone like the Lord Shiva would not be comparable to the way Westerners classically have used the word God, and that's interesting as well. Certainly, excuse me, I will promise I'll have a sip of water in a minute. You know, if the way Buddhists would use that word, that concept, and they do talk about Ishvara, they do talk about the prime cause, you know, they don't really dismiss. I mean, the thing I remember to this day, when I was unique looking way back when, I majored in Hinduism and I minored in Buddhism, which you could do in those days. I bet you bloody couldn't now, you know, even though I'm on a theology course. So I mean, I don't know, I always thought the Buddhists were slick boys, those slick meditators in the East, they know how to play a game or two. You know, I mean, the Buddha doesn't actually say, no, there is no God. I mean, he was asked directly sometimes, do you believe in God? I mean, not put quite that simply. And right, so the guy's intelligent, clearly. All he has to say is no or yes. You know, it's that simple. But he decides not to say no or yes. He decides to say not yes, not no. He doesn't want to answer the question, because for him, as the great physician of souls, that wasn't the question we should concern ourselves with at this moment. What we should worry about now is saving ourselves from this sea of suffering and woe and anger and resentment. And how do we do that? Through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So that was what he wanted people to focus on. Not really the Hindu metaphysicians and their endlessly wonderful questions about Ishvara, you know, the self-perpetuating, the self-generating divine being, and is that above Brahman, the grounder being, with most of them saying no, and that would be the Shaivites, they'd say no. Whereas the followers of Krishna, the followers of Bhagavan would have said, well, yes, clearly it is. So these are not trivial questions. These are absolutely wonderful questions, because then you're looking at something like a personal God, whatever that might mean. You know, for me, that's just opened up a new question mark. It actually hasn't answered anything. So when we're looking at the Krishna school and the schools of the Bhagavan, then we can start saying, right, okay, the Jews say this, the Muslims say this, we say that. What's that got in common? What's separate from all of that? Of course, Christians make an extra audacious comment, because they claim, we claim, that somehow, you know, the three that were one, the one that were three, somehow the second person of the Trinity actually is the Word. And again, I have huge, you know, these things aren't meant to be, you know, you don't sit down and analyze. I mean, certainly in the past, when you're looking at a Zen-like riddle, you're looking at a direct contradiction. You know, Kierkegaard was the first one to point it out properly. You know, God, the figure of Jesus Christ is fully human and fully divine. Okay, that can't exist, but that's the faith of Christianity. So, you know, these people aren't underachievers. So what are they getting at? The fact that the word took flesh, as it says in most of the catechisms, but for me, I don't know, I just can't, you know, I can't approach it without a mystagogue. In the past, of course, these mystical teachings would have had a mystagogue who would have answered, and one was expected not to base these things on logic, but on the experience brought out of meditation and the equivalence of yoga. I've always thought, basically, for want of a much better word, this is where everyone jumps on me, Western occultism, you know, following Big Al, actually that is the yoga of the West. I think that's spot on, that's a bullseye. I think the pagan traditions, so-called, yeah, they're curiously in a position to answer it more than us nowadays, and shame on us, because I mean, you know, it wasn't just your pagans that got persecuted by the church. It was people like me on 2 counts, you know, raving puff, and someone that wants answers to these questions. So, you know, I'd have got it on both counts. Yeah, so there would have been an answer, but not of the prescriptive, definitional, logical type, because they would have felt that wasn't an answer. The fact that Jesus Christ is the Word made flesh, now that's truth, I suppose, in the Platonic triad, you know, goodness, beauty and truth. Whereas, right, so how would that pack out loosely? Yeah, so we've got a clue what it all means. So God is the good, whatever that means. Plato himself says he doesn't know really what that's getting at. You know, the truth is the mediator between all these things. Beauty is the Holy Spirit, which of course was feminine. So, you know, you're looking at a great mystery, which this is said with the deepest respect to the Protestant theologians, some of whom are absolutely totally mind-blowing. You know, in the Catholic tradition, you know, as I say, you know, for those who don't know me, I'm a liberal Catholic. You know, the type of Catholicism that comes through theosophy, the type of Catholicism that comes through anthroposophy. You know, for us, you can't really reduce everything to a formula and then take the formula apart and think you've done something. So all you've really done is asserted a formula about what people may or may not have thought and said in the past, and you've done what you did with it. But can the great mysteries of life really be reduced to something formulaic? That's not being snipey. The biggest theological influences on me are actually Protestants. Having said that, but you know, I'm very aware I'm aware that there's a ceiling into which that can't go. That, you know, there's a point beyond the analytical words said analytically. Formulations, anything formulated can be deconstructed. So is that really what they were talking about? And you know, I'm into Derrida.
Derrida, what's that?
Well, Derrida was the modern philosopher, and what a total commo. Save it, Derrida, save it. Save your communism, matey. Oh no, it was this wonderful of the left, wonderful philosopher, Jacques Derrida. I mean, I got into him by accident, where there was this sort of weird documentary, you know, the word, what is the word? You say this and I say that, you know, and it was seeing him walk down the Champs-Elysees with this shock of white hair from behind me, thinking, you posing bastard, I'd love a photograph of me like that. Then you see this gorgeous young sort of French interview. Oh, Monsieur Girard, you know, Monsieur Derrida, what do you think of love? Love is a word. You say love, I say love. Oh God, you bastard! I'd have loved to have done all of that. So I mean, what's he interested in? He's interested. People used to think he was a nihilist. Have you noticed how many people are very quick to make comments without actually having read anything or knowing what somebody's talking about?
I do notice that a lot. I see people talk about things and then I find out they've not actually read that person's writing. They've read a book about them. Well, I mean, something I try and encourage all the time. Read the actual origin of things.
Oh no, that's our generation, Debbie. You know, now everybody's a universal genius about everything, thanks to Uncle Google. You know, there's a ceiling, youngsters. There's a ceiling. You know, what does Uncle Google know about experience? Ding, time's up, 0 is the answer to that. Yeah, I mean, right, Derrida. I mean, I think people in the original, you know, in the early days thought he was a nihilist because he's the guy that starts deconstruction. You know, let's take apart sentences, phrases, clauses. Let's take away the meanings of the word because all words have histories. Excuse me. A word is like a person. It's born at a particular place and time. It has a history, it matures, it accrues meanings, and it dies. I mean, most words actually die. They pass at a common coinage. So he wanted to see what he called the archaeology of language. You know, let's excavate this and excavate that and see what you're left with. So he got accused of all sorts of nasty things. I was one of those people deeply suspicious that there wasn't some sort of mysticism at work. He'd have probably been, as a commo, step outside, comma, you know, he'd have probably said, no, you know, nonsense. But I mean, there was something going on. You know, when people start talking about the absence of absence, okay, come on. Anyone that's ever thought of a via negativa, anyone that's ever, you know, the Buddhist stuff where you don't answer questions, you don't formulate questions, St. John of the Cross, what does all that silence actually mean? You know, there's knowledge in the silence. Okay, Derrida, I've got your number. I'm on your case. You know, there's something going on there. But of course, he shocked everybody in the latter part of his life. And I think deconstruction, by the way, commo jokes apart, is one of the most important developments in modern philosophy. I think it's absolutely vital if people haven't acquainted themselves with it, that they at least look at it, because it's this revolution of how we understand language, and we are primarily language users, whether that is the spoken word or body language, which of course is basically 95% of our communicating capacities. The verbals are the icing on the cake. Monkeys, apes, they articulate nearly as much as us on that pre-linguistic level. It stops with them when it starts becoming something like a language. So then you're thrown back. Okay, what does it mean? But you know, what do you mean by language? Dolphins actually have some sort of language. Whales have some sort of language. But let's take beehives. They have languages, but it's a language of dance and perfume.
It's funny you say that, because I was going to reply to you with interpretive dance.
I used to cut a mean mustard on the dance floor, young Debbie. I'll see you there. Mind you, with my arthritic knees, I might have to work up to it nowadays. So yeah, but no, I mean, you know, so the pre-linguistic side of it, which is really right, that's really what he's getting at. You know, and then let's look at this extra bit, which have given so much power to our particular species. You know, what is it and what's it doing? Of course, he managed to pull the rug from the linguistic table, underneath the linguistic table, at the end of his career by talking about the indestructible. Ah, you mean God? got you, you
Yeah.
swine, got you. You know, what is it that can't be deconstructed? And of course, you end up with only one thing that can't be deconstructed. So yeah, I mean, if we're looking at words a bit, right, so who were the big influences on me way back when, and probably still now to an extent? Jacques Derrida amongst the Frenchies, and our beloved own Ludwig Wittgenstein, you know, the most religious atheist in human history. And you know, anyone that has who wrote two masterpieces, people need to keep up with what's being said. The Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus is a masterpiece. It's Wittgenstein's view of how far theories of linguistics can go. And then he thought, right, that's it, done and dusted, let's go out and party, which he did in various forms. What was it, for 10 years, 20 years? And then thought, oh, bugger, no, I still haven't answered this, that, and the other. So he wrote another masterpiece. I hate him. He wrote another masterpiece, which is the one that obsesses me, the Philosophical Investigations, because there are really religious strains. I mean, never have admitted that then, behind the whole enterprise, you know, behind the philosophical questions that very quickly shade into theological questions. You know, why is there something rather than nothing? What does that mean? And of course, it came out sort of slightly, was it slightly before or slightly after that, that when he was a serving soldier, I mean, he was a complete pacifist. He wouldn't engage in unarmed combat. He actually had a row with Bertrand Russell about that at one point. Although he did say to comfortable Uncle Bertie that he preferred to be bayoneted to death than become a liberal like him. So good on you, good on you. Oh, because it's all so smug, you know, upper middle class. And I actually, when I was very, very young and he was very, very old, I actually knew Bertrand Russell. So I'm not going too far.
Did you? Well, you used to go and sit at his knee and listen to him?
I used to sit next to his chain because we used to chain ourselves to railings on CND marches.
No.
Hell no, we won't go. What were the others? Oh, I can't remember the nuclear ones. Anti this and anti that. I can't remember them. That was so long ago. So yeah, well, Bertie, what did you think? So I'm pleased you asked that. So you know,
but that's a way of using the word, though, isn't it? Going on protests and putting forth your, you know, anti nuclear and all that kind of thing. But you're having to obviously do protests of chaining yourself to the fence, but at the same time you're obviously saying things. So the power of that word.
Well, I think the pre-linguistics actually came in more than the power of the word, you know, like knocking policemen's hats off, which I used to delight in. And
you could get arrested for that.
Oh, nowadays, they used to think it was just part and parcel of life in those days. I mean, what was it? Theology student, sir? Yes. You know, so a bit later on, admittedly. So and they sort of knew him. So, you know, they just helped him stand up when they were untying him from the rails. No, things were complete. Oh, all right, I'll tell you a story there. I went on a recent couple of years ago. There was some anti-nuclear, anti-fascist, anti-this, anti-that march going through the centre of London, where police were operating briefly on a zero tolerance policy. I'm sorry, we pay your wages. I'm sorry, we pay your wages. It's called tax.
It's one of the things I think we need a police overhaul. They need to understand that they're looking after us.
Yeah, whatever happened to community policing, Debbie? Oh, you know, my God.
They're little Nazis.
Right, and now it's the type of people they're recruiting nowadays, the Dudley Do-Rights, as they say in America, you know, that have the principle in their head and not the humanity. I mean, you know, the two are meant to be linked together. Anyway, we got kettled by Selfridges. Oh, I could have murdered a cup of tea. We got kettled by Selfridges. And the police have got sneakier over the years. So I was there with my leaflets talking about universal pacifism. I actually have signed the pledge. I'm a pacifist. And I was trying to give out badges. Rule number one about the Pacifist Society UK, they make crap badges. Don't buy one because the pin will come off really quickly. They've got to do better with that.
I'm surprised you didn't get arrested for a lethal weapon.
Well, I'm sure they'd have done that if they got the chance, Debbie. I mean, that's the, you know, the level of tolerance they were literally showing that day. But they no, they got my number. They got my number, and they said, "Oh, we believe a colleague," because I was in my tweed jacket. "We believe a colleague of yours is over there, sir," and it was someone I knew from UCL. So, you know, and they escorted me over there, and then we were sat down for our own protection. And I remember saying to this eminent scholar, who better remain nameless, "Oh my God, we've just been kettled. Right, we can't go forward, we can't go back, but it's all for our own protection." And then we heard, you know, as rumours came back down the line, that a group of young anarcho-primitivists painted themselves green and gone naked at the front. Oh, I could have done that back in the day. You kids think of nothing. You know, they'd started practically a riot, giving the police all the excuses they need, you know. So we were escorted off the march for our safety, with me sort of, how this is disgraceful, you know, no good whatsoever, because they made their minds up to get pushed off. So that's the word, and certainly Wittgenstein. You know, when he was the warrior Wittgenstein, which he certainly did not approve of, you know, had a series of mystical experiences, genuine mystical experiences. I'm not exaggerating the power of philosophy, and the power of philosophy is barely understood nowadays, its depth and its profundity. But no, I mean, genuine mystical experience, other modalities of perception, which he didn't like talking about, at least back then, which clearly colour the philosophical investigations, and which he wants to talk about later on, through his obsession with purity. What is purity? Doing the right thing by your neighbor. What is purity? Doing the right thing by yourself. What is purity? Trying to understand what binds us all together. You know, what is purity? Being able to look yourself in the mirror. Something Johnny Depp and young Amber might not be able to do at the minute. Yes, I'm sorry. Media circuses and gargoyles. Is she lying in every single court scene I see her in? And she's met her nemesis, Miss Vasquez, who is becoming...
I got mistaken for earlier today on your Facebook page. I know we look alike, but
you do. Two stunners. And
no, I feel sorry for Johnny. I can understand how all this has happened, but he's tried his best with a woman who, you know, exactly, is a bit psychotic. I'll probably get sued for that, but I don't care. But, you know, there are people that misuse the word and use it against people. Yeah. And that's what she's done.
I think psychotic is pretty mild from what's floating around at the moment. And I imagine we're sort of 100th millionth down the list of people she wants to sue. You know, I think it might have come home that she's not winning the case when people are booing her nowadays as she goes into court. I couldn't resist the dog and the bee thing. I'm sorry, you know, my dog stood on a bee, so I did my version of my apple falling from a tree. You know, for God's sake, woman. And somebody's done this animation of the bee wanting to fight everybody. It's come back with a vengeance.
I've not seen that yet.
I'll try and send you one. It's brilliant. The bee had enough. So, you know, Wittgenstein is the other wordsmith of our generation. People mistake me, I think. They have me down as some sort of anachronism or archaist, where I only ever look at the past and the wisdom of the past. Actually, I'm some sort of weird, twisted modernist. I think we're doing better now than we've ever done in history. I think we're learning more than we've ever learned before. I think we're understanding more, curing more. There's a guilty conscience now about people not being housed and fed. That never existed before.
Exactly, yes.
You know, I mean, you know, we're coming out of hell. We're not going back into it. We're not going into it. You know, if you look at our ancestors, I've said it before and I'll say it again, even on your show, Debbie, they were bastards, and we've just got to face it. Yeah, how could they all sleep at night knowing some of the things that were going on around them, and they were doing, and they did, right? That doesn't show they're good, saintly people handing the baton of innocence to the descending generations. They were bastards. You couldn't have had a Hegel, you couldn't have had a Wittgenstein, you couldn't have had a Derrida, you couldn't have had a Margot Fontaine, you couldn't have had any of the luminaries, Jodorowsky is somebody other, you couldn't have had the film, you couldn't have had the music, you couldn't have had the paintings, you couldn't have had any of the things, certainly not the type of medicine that we're developing in the West, let alone the fact that it can learn. Western materialist medicine finally admits it's got a lot to learn from the Chinese. Even 2 centuries ago, that wouldn't have happened. Are we becoming increasing prisoners in this iron cell of the mind? I don't know, because, human beings work on many levels with many facets. And certainly if we look at the politics and we look at the economics of nowadays, it's really tempting to think, and I was just showing you a minute ago, the New Feudalism book, it's tempting to think that certain forces want to go back in that direction. And I don't doubt that. But would it
That's
even
a control thing, isn't it? They want to control us. Where, as you were saying, people are sort of feeling more conscious of what's going on. And by doing that, they're beginning to talk to, that's it, that's the book you was talking to me about. So you recommend this?
Yeah, I recommend it very highly. It's remarkable.
Because we don't want to go back into this kind of state at all. We want to be a community world where everyone's helping each other and aware of each other. Exactly. And I think, again, that's people discussing and talking about, obviously we've got social media to help people be more aware of those that are in dire straits. There's still people that turn a blind eye, though.
Well, I might be a pastor, but I'm not the type that likes hammering people over the head about things like that. Don't we all have hard enough lives anyway? I think you get 2 sorts of pastor. The type that like living up to an ideal, and there's nothing wrong with that, provided you don't think everyone's just bound to go to hell the minute they're not trying to live up to that ideal. Because there are other ways of communicating that as a perception, as a notion. And there are the type, I suppose, more like myself, that think, okay, let's start with the existential. This is where we are and this is what we are. And what mercy we've been shown by the higher powers, what mercy we've been shown by the light, by the good, by the true, what mercy has been extended to us. Therefore, let's try and grow, let's try and develop in that direction, let's try and evolve tiny step by tiny step until we reach the promised land. I mean, that's much more me. And I think we've got to do that. Is there a new ruling elite? Yes, they're now composed of billionaires, not even mere millionaires. Do they seem to think that there are only 2 classes, them and everybody else? Yes, that does appear to be the case. If we go back 5 centuries and there were class divisions equal to that, although not based entirely around money, would they have thought that? Yes. They wouldn't have realized lots of people would have disagreed, and they wouldn't have realized that they might be in the wrong. They do now. They do now. So I'm not losing my utopian point. There is at least a nous that all is not correct if you're doing that. You may do that and you may succeed for a while, but it's not right and it's not true and it won't last. And the forces of history and the forces of spirit will eventually sweep that away as well. I'm always tempted to flirt with reincarnation. I'm tempted to flirt with new souls and old souls and that sort of thing. Have all these new souls, have some of the old souls come into this particular world scheme just to be imprisoned in a materialistic hellhole? No. If there is something like a choice with a future incarnation, loads of people have come back to bear witness to the fact there's a better way to live in the here and now, and not simply in some sort of neo-Atlantean future. So how can we be really, really pessimistic? All it means is the fight between inertia, between, I'll just settle down and everything can go away. Between that, and that's the real wickedness, between that and the light, the energy, the strength, the power, the vril, as they used to say, the chutzpah, if I want to do a Sammy Davis Jr. impression, the chutzpah. That's the real battle, and that's really what's just starting. And who will win? Every single one of us and the world itself when we live in a better society. That's what's on its way. So for me, the word isn't simply an icing on a pre-linguistic cake, although I do take the point. I mean, that itself is an incredible discovery. That wouldn't have been possible to frame, let alone explore, let alone to experiment with 2 centuries ago. That wouldn't have happened. You know, and the fact that animals don't speak, period, because they were looking at these things in a much simpler way. You know, the fact that we do know that now, the fact we know that it can be dance, communication, knowledge. How about that for a daring concept? It could be perfume, it can be feeling. Some of the insect species actually feel their way towards knowledge. They share it with each other. I mean, if the worker ants in some species have preset paths by the pathfinders, they have an aristocracy. The libertarian in me finds that difficult, but hey, if it works for them, you know, so they have an aristocracy that give pathfinders very clear instructions about how you get to and from their place of residence. And if there's a disruption, they get ant people, they get ants to come and repair the route and tell them everything is all right. They're repairing the route so they can go back. I mean, that couldn't have been discovered a couple of centuries ago.
Well, Steiner says that, Rudolf Steiner says that's because animals have a soul conscious, don't they? Like the ants have one conscience that they're all part of, so they can all communicate that way, or they're being told or whatever. So they're all in tune with each other, which kind of like what I suppose Elon Musk wants with the old neural link of that we're all linked up so we can all hear each other's thoughts. Well, that's what the animals have already, but naturally.
I'm not sure I'm old enough to hear everybody else's thoughts. And bearing in mind the level and quality they may be part of, I'm not sure I particularly want to.
I know, that's why I don't think Elon Musk understands what the general public are thinking most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, there are only so many sexual positions you can manage to get into your brain at one time. And I'm worried about the shopping as much as everybody else, I'm sorry. Yeah, so, you know, do I really, oh God, you reminded me now. Remember, I grew up in Fareham in Hampshire, so I'm a Hampshire hog, I'm a country boy. And there was a theory coming out when I was still living down there that every Chinese takeaway was actually an outlet for the Chinese spy service. And they were taping
the Chinese army.
Well, you know, they were taping every single conversation. I remember saying way back when, my God, the amount of shit they must listen to if that's true. You know, everybody's drunk after a movie or the pub. They're ordering their takeout. You know, I mean, what's no wonder the party's not getting anywhere if that's what they're bogged down listening to. So, I mean, mind you, China's an aggressive player in world politics now, so we'll probably all be paying our bills in Mandarin in 10 years' time.
Well, actually, near where I live, there's a giant woods, and on the other side of it is a power station. They've been digging, for some reason, a big tunnel for a couple of years now. But some of my friends are adamant that it's not us digging it, it's the Chinese army coming through.
Oh, the sooner the better. Are they going to sack Boris? I'll vote for them. If they sack Boris, I'll vote for them. That gets me off everybody's favourite top of the Christmas card list. I'm sorry, I just think people should be accountable. He broke the law and he broke parliamentary procedure. And in any other decade, any other prime minister would have felt he had to resign. If we really want to put up with that in British politics, whereby authority itself is now under question, therefore democracy, the whole idea of democracy is disappearing because accountability is disappearing. I'm sorry, I really don't want to live in a world where democracy is so weak that anything else replaces it. That terrifies me.
Well, we could also put it to the fact that he wasn't using his words rightly. He was telling us one thing, speaking, telling us what to do with his voice, his words, but then not applying that himself to his own people and himself. So again, that's a misuse of the word.
Yeah, I think you're avoiding the word lie. I mean, he was clearly lying and he got caught out. And no, this one rule for us and one for them. No, that's not our way. That's not the British way. That's the mother of parliaments. We can boast of having the mother of parliaments. We can boast, right? We don't have a written constitution, but everybody sort of knows how to behave. And decency and fair play were always part of that. Open borders were always part of that. We welcomed people into our midst when they were going through a bit of a crisis. That's our wonderful history, not this sort of exclusionary, you know, crypto extreme right. That's not our history. I've more room for the old Tories than I do for the new Tories. You know, right, so landed gentry, admittedly, personally, I wish that would disappear into the dustbin of history. But, you know, let's see what happens.
But then you've reminded me of something now, of what you said. Oh, sorry to interrupt you, but you were saying about vibrations.
Yep.
So when someone's lying to us, we should be able to feel that negative vibration, or that, you know, it should be a bit chaotic or something, shouldn't we? You know, and I wonder if people just are tuned out from this now. Like when we hear truth, the vibration should be nice and pure, and a nice vibration that makes us feel good.
Well, you actually hit something there. I think you're trying to bring me back to topic. I do need to be brought back to topic. Actually, that's an example of nobody listening. Boris Johnson has said for years in the open what he believed and what he wanted to do, and nobody was listening. They were seeing the buffoon, they were seeing the comedy act, they were seeing that he's a bit of a laugh, and they weren't listening. And all of a sudden it's come as a shock when he's actually got his hands on the levers of power and he's doing what he said he was going to do. So, you know, words have to be listened to. It's not enough saying them, which leads me back to the Messiah.
From Boris to the Messiah.
Well, from Christ, yeah. I mean, certainly Jesus of Nazareth, I love the theosophical interpretations, most of them. I love the anthroposophical interpretations. There is a difference. It's not true enough to the original materials to talk about the ministry and the church and Christian culture through an Eastern lens. I mean, it's instructive beyond belief, but it's not true enough to the original materials to say that's done and dusted and that's it. What they meant to say was, I mean, that won't do at all. And that's, of course, one of the reasons, probably the primary reason, why Rudolf Steiner split from the Theosophical Society and started the Anthroposophical Society. You know, we're working on the premise, as I do, that there's nothing these slick boys in the East know that we don't know here. We know all those things. We've articulated them differently. And sometimes we put them into books. They do that too. But, you know, we've made it a very textual thing over a couple of centuries. And therefore, you know, we must look at the materials and what they're saying if we're to do justice to the meaning of those materials. And certainly the idea of casting Jesus Christ as a bodhisattva is beautiful, but it's not quite what the materials are saying. And it's not simply because they didn't have that concept. You know, it's true, they didn't have that concept, but looking at the type of conceptuality that they did have, that wouldn't be the sort of concept they're referring to. I remember listening, was it Marshall Sahlins, some sort of university lecture years back saying, you know, it's wrong to ask where God is in Buddhism because it would be like asking where the Buddha is in Christianity. And I thought about that for a long time, but actually you're wrong. Actually, you're wrong with that. For the simple reason Buddha doesn't answer, to get back to an earlier point, he doesn't say no. He's more than capable of saying no. And because, you know, you're talking about an enlightened human being that surely Christians also talk about, the Jews talk about, the Muslims talk about, they use different names. And they still say there's a step beyond that. And that's where Buddhism doesn't go, at least the type of Buddhism available outside the monasteries and to the West. You know, what they say amongst themselves in the monasteries is a mystery because we don't know. So we can't base theories and books and arguments on that, but we can say from what we know, they don't say that.
They're giving us an exterior version and they're having their esoteric version inside.
Oh, I mean, truly, but, you know, I mean, I'm a great admirer of Madame Alexandra David-Neel. I mean, she's one of the first, you know, what a woman.
I know. 2020, I was supposed to go to her house to see the museum because it's been turned into a museum.
Oh,
yes.
No, we've got to go together, Debbie. I'm just totally in awe of her. It's not true to say there weren't great women scholars in the past. That nonsense has to go. It's not true to say there weren't great explorers who were women in the past. That nonsense has to go. Just because a few politically aware American feminists, and I'm on their side normally, you know, say that didn't happen. It's not true because you're actually missing huge numbers of incredibly important scholars, including Blavatsky.
Maybe we should explain who Alexander David-Neel is. Do you want to do that? I'll let you do that.
Madame Alexandre David-Neel was an accredited French scholar and a French academician who had a deep love of Tibet and the mysteries of the East. She actually went to Tibet to study it on not only a philological, but as we'd say, ethnobotanic, I believe, if I remember reading the books correctly. She was looking at the flora, the fauna, and so on, as well as the cultures, as a French scholar in Tibet and around the area. What she discovers there, the psychic powers, which she clearly defines and explains how they're generated, how they work, the cultures which had never been done before, hardly any Westerner had been there, let alone a woman.
Well, she was one of the first, wasn't she? And she went disguised as a man.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, we can't say she's the actual first because there's a question mark with one or two others.
She was one of the first.
Yeah, but certainly one of the first. And yeah, she went disguised as a man. She had no, you know, she was that sort of British matron type, which I've always liked, you know, just get on and get up and get on with things, which we need more. We need that back. We need it back nowadays. You know, and her books are encyclopedic. She describes the spirituality, the religion of the lamas. There is actually, of course, one book on the secret doctrine, which I mean, not in Blavatsky's sense, in the sense she was learning from the lamas of her particular order because she was initiated as a Buddhist nun, although they counted her as a monk. And they told her what the mystery is, what the Maha teaching actually was. Now, I'm not saying there's a flaw in theosophy. I just think they're talking about different things, you know, yada, yada, yada. But she said to some of the lamas she was talking to, well, why don't you go out and spread it everywhere? And they said, well, you know, take it back to Paris and shout it in a cafe and see how many people listen to you.
Yes.
You know, so, you know, it's that sort of gritty knowledge of the East. And they're right, you know, people will listen or they won't. There's no point bullying anybody into it because it wouldn't do any good anyway. You know, people, when they're ready, they find that sort of thing. When they're not ready, they don't find that sort of thing. And I don't mean somebody dropping out the sky, you know, and saying, you know, oh, this is what it means. You know, here's the file that answers everything. No, in the sense that you become open to these ideas and you become aware, in a sense you weren't before, the existence of these philosophies and the fact they're important. In the sense that, you know, someone I really admire, who everyone tells me I shouldn't, but I don't know why, Alice Bailey. Well, I mean, she did have an argy-bargy with the TS, let's face it. Well,
she's the Lucis Trust now, isn't she? I used to go to their meditations many years ago.
I used to turn up as one of the hidden adepts. What was it, Thursday afternoon, where people meet, what was it they say in their bump? I can't remember. You know, people from all walks of life mysteriously meet together. So I used to do that, and they put the information sheet on the seat. And for the life of me, I couldn't follow it. You know, there'd be somebody going home at the front. Then I'd think, oh my God, has it started or hasn't it started? Then I'd find we were halfway down the sheet. So no, I love them. And I think she's incredibly misunderstood and maligned far too much. And right, she had the temerity to talk to some of Blavatsky's masters. Big deal. You know, there we are. I
think that's what annoyed them, wasn't it? Because they think only Blavatsky can talk to them, or only Besson. And it's one of the things that annoys me about theosophy. Why can the masters not talk to other people?
Oh, truly. And, you know, and also, you know, how do we know? I mean, would Blavatsky have said that? I bet she wouldn't. I bet she was she was a big woman in every sense of the word. You know, she wouldn't have been bothered by that sort of nonsense. It's always the sort of courtiers, it's always the politicians that come afterwards that worry about that. I mean, I noticed there's a caveat. I think a treatise on white magic is one of the most important books in esotericism that's ever been written. Moot point, right? Did she write it or did the Tibetan write it through her? Was it a collaboration of the two of them? I mean, surely it had to be a collaboration because she wouldn't have had the vocabulary to write it down. If she'd just been Joan Bloggs down the road, I mean, that wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I mean, it says very clearly that these books will mean nothing until the student is right until the student is open to that. And I remember in my own history, reading them as a callow cub, thinking, what the hell was all that about? And going back to them years later, and in the last decade, about 5 years, 6 years ago, and thinking, no, I can really see some profundities in this. But I don't like the style they're written in. But hey, that's not the biggest of deals. And it's incredible material. Back to JC.
Oh, go on. Yes, sorry. Back to.
Oh, good Lord. Back to JC. Oh, good Lord. Well, of course, I mean, liberal Catholics, since we have those origins, I mean, you've got to remember, I mean, my particular group, we do follow the Latin rite, even though this is where it gets needlessly technical. Although we do come out of the Syrian monasteries originally, not the Italian monasteries. As I said, I think on the last show, people have to remember there are three basic types of Catholic. The Catholicism that comes out of the Italian monasteries, the Catholicism that comes out of the Alexandrian, as it would have been those days, monasteries, and the Catholicism that comes out of the Syrian monasteries. It was the Syrian type that actually went through theosophy and anthroposophy for various reasons we can all argue about, and some of the monks over there felt they hadn't been told the entire truth, but the transmission was given. Whether you like it or not, the transmission was given. And so why don't you like it? What, because it doesn't agree with every jot and tittle of a particular dogma? No,
but what does these days? Not much does it?
Well, so anyway, we awful liberal types think it's bigger than that. We do talk about the one life. The absolute for us is the one life. So we're on very common ground, mystical ground with theosophy and the AS. Obviously, I find more of a link with the AS simply because they're using a terminology that I'm slightly more comfortable with and can manipulate, in other words, work with in an easier way, not because I don't necessarily know enough of those other stuff, but I always think, you get to a certain point in discussing Eastern philosophy where even technical words in a philosophical system, all of a sudden it's stretching into cultural history and it's stretching into a line of teachers. And then, okay, if you're not part of that culture, you probably won't get it unless you decide to live out there and you devote the whole of your life to that. So there is a cutoff point, whereas we can't and shouldn't say that in our own culture because it surrounds us, and some people don't like it, but whether they like it or not, Christianity of every type permeates the culture. We have access to the myths, the legends, the stories of a number of traditions, and we can put those to use whenever we wish. And, they surround us. We will get to the original meaning of those words. And it will be in a much quicker time than somebody relocating to Benares and learning Sanskrit, which you would have to do to really take that, at the level of seriousness these things deserve. So
Steiner says they're two different streams, doesn't he? The East is one stream and the West is another stream, like with Christianity and or even the Norse or whatever. The Western side of the world has a different, I don't know if it's theology, but because they're two different streams that can work together, but it depends on where you're set, like exactly like what you're saying. We can't relocate to somewhere to try and learn an Eastern if we're from the West.
Yeah. And that's not me. I mean, don't get me wrong, Debbie. I'm not taking away from the sanctity or the power of somewhere like Benares or Hinduism. As I say, I majored in Hinduism, and it was just this mind-blowing experience. I can't remember the name of the goddess whose head is a flower, but the hippie side of me was just going on and on about that for weeks. And,
but it's good to look at both sides. I think that's right, because I'm very, like we were saying at the beginning, I'm very into the Eastern gods. I've got my little Eastern goddesses over here and my Egyptian ones and things. I'm very into mix and match religions all the time and theologies, because I think everything's got a truth.
Yeah, you're too hard on yourself there. The critics, what is a mix and match religion? Mix and match religion. People are too quick to say that. What does that mean? All of those images and objets d'art and paintings and sculptures, they have meaning for you. So what does that mean? I think we give in to the skeptics a little too quickly nowadays. Syncretism. Okay, what do people mean by that? One of the big criticisms of the TS is they're all syncretists. Okay, what are they actually joining and melding? Can you please tell me that? Because that's not what Blavatsky thought she was doing. She thought she was bringing out a hidden, more profound level to these cultures. She didn't believe she was marrying things together. No, I don't go along with that at all. So, right, you will, if you come across in a shop a little statue of Kuan Yin, the Madonna of the East, the gentle nun who gives birth to the new Bodhisattva, and you treasure that, and you suddenly learn something more about the concept of the Virgin Mary, how can anybody say that was wrong? And how could anybody say, oh, that's only syncretism? Well, hang on, you found a way into that concept, that cluster of ideas that you couldn't find anywhere else. So no, I'm really, oh my God, is that theosophical in me coming up? Oh my God.
You're right, you're absolutely right, what you're saying.
Yeah. So, I've absolutely no truck with that. I think we all give in to that type of criticism far too easily. And, it's our job as spiritual aspirants. And what is wrong with that? To say, well, hang on a second. No, that isn't describing my experience. And it's not, you are just throwing an objection without really too much substance behind it.
Yeah. Right. I get a lot of people actually saying to me, I must pick a path. I'm like, what? Surely all paths lead to Rome or to God.
I bloody hope not. With the deepest love and respect to all of my friends in Rome.
I meant to God. I meant to say to the divine.
There was a famous showdown between one of the Gnostics, Gilbert de Cast, and what was it, St. Dominic? He was not a saint, I'm sorry. Whereas it was dramatized a couple of years ago in the series Gnostics. Tobias Churton.
Oh, Churton, yes, okay, I remember that series. I have that book actually. Yes, that was on Channel 4, good series.
Oh, and loads of my books went missing. I'm sure people know what I mean by that, but I'm not happy about that. But they went missing. Brian Blessed played Gilbert de Cast. You must be kidding! Stop shouting! He's a gentle monk. Stop shouting! So, I mean, he's holding up a sunflower in this open vignette. And meditating on it, and an exchange, obviously a dramatized exchange, starts between the two of them, and the Brian Blessed character Gilbert says basically, my master is Amor, not Roma, which of course was one of the accusations floating around in those days. My master is Amor, wisdom, not Roma, Rome. That's actually very, very, very important, because what they're not having a go directly at Rome. What they're having a go at is the fact that doctrines and dogmas don't take you the whole way. And again, everybody's up in arms and everybody's fighting. Slow down. What is the guy trying to say? And he's saying something very, very, very profound indeed. Obviously, push came to shove, but that's human history. Remember, I'm working on the premise that most of our ancestors are bastards. So yeah, it was bound to have come to that, wasn't it? Right, back to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I will get there. You won't stop me. So, the fact that you have a person of the divine Trinity, the fact you have divinity, the fact you have, what's a better way of putting it? I mean, there are so-called entire schools of heretical teaching, right? So who's calling them heretical and who's saying standard is standard? And then you get into the whole politics of the church, which I detest. But we mustn't pretend it's not important, because it is important, because it actually impacts the wider cultural field and the word field, the linguistic fields we all live in. So it is important. Excuse me. I then had a gust of pollen which felled me in a second.
A little bit of hay fever there.
I had
the
it
devil
when
putting that there. Doesn't want you speaking.
Why? Listen,
damn your eyes, devil.
Yeah, take that, you swine. Well, I used to
get behind me. Sorry.
Oh no, I'm not going that far. I mean, that's comparing yourself. That's comparing yourself with the big cheese himself, isn't it? No, I'm not going that far. And it can be taken the wrong way nowadays anyway. So I'm not going down that route. The minute they know a gay vicar's saying something like that, so I'm not going down that route. And and I'll just live with the fact it caught me just as I was about to say something. So yeah, I'm from Hampshire, remember, so I did used to have hay fever, and I was a rough, tough farmhand in those days. I'm sorry. Oh my God, I can't do a thing. I've got hay fever. And I didn't have it for years. I moved up to London in the early 80s, and oh my God, it's gone. It's gone, and now of course it's back because pollen up here mixes with the pollution.
Yes.
And it's 10 times worse than it ever was in Hampshire. So can't be right. Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ the Redeemer. There we are. So the idea is that the one divine life, the one substance, people must never forget that we're Trinitarians who are also monotheists. For us, the one thing is three primary things, but they're not separate. And the three intertwined things point to an ultimate unity beyond themselves. And that's where the theologians and the theologians start wrangling. I think that's more a question of meditation and prayer. But as a liberal Catholic, I would. I mean, yeah. So what we're saying is that substance, that life, that living consciousness realized something needed to be adjusted, or something needed to be pushed in our world, a little push to get it evolving a bit more fast. And that one divine thing took form among us as one of us and spoke about what it wanted, he wanted, she wanted. That, if that's true, is the most mind-blowing thing in human history. Also, it would be even more cryptic because Jesus Christ, apart from the Sermon on the Mount, which of course is all love and light, does not spell out what he wants people to do. He gives parables, he gives stories, he gives contradictions, he gives contrasts. I mean, the whipping of the money changers out of the temple, that of course is a demonstration of theology more than an argument. You know, my father's house is a house of prayer, not a den of thieves. Oh, so that's all about putting first things first. Is he saying that it's sinful to be a businessman? No. He is saying don't do it here and now. That's inappropriate. So, you know, what we've been asked to do is decode the life meaning of all these images, symbols, stories, and work out what that means to us as community and what that means to us as individuals. Could Jesus Christ have written a book? I suspect the answer would have been yes. Could Socrates have written a book? I suspect the answer would have been yes. They both chose not to. Plato writes a book. The apostles sort of write books. I mean, what they actually do is write accounts. Although, of course, one has to remember, even that's not as straightforward as it appears. The mystery schools that started around each of the apostles, because the transmissions were oral. I mean, most of the ancient world didn't believe in the validity or the power of textual transmission. It was initiatic. You know, when someone said in those days, "Have you seen the Lord?" That wasn't meant to be a metaphor. That was meant to be an actual visionary experience, an encounter in consciousness with you and your deeper parts. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Have you seen the Lord? That is not what people mean nowadays. What can the modern church be accused of most of all? Adultery. We've gone off whoring after everything apart from the kingdom within. So that's the sin the church has committed, not the others. And that is a terrible sin because it's, of course, in the list of the 10 Commandments. And you have to make reparation as you would with a spouse. You can't just pretend nothing has happened, as Amber Heard is fully aware to all the boos as she goes into court. You can't pretend nothing has happened. You've got to make reparation. So that's the sin of modern times, in my own humble view. So the essence, the energy, the soul of the cosmos came and lived and broke bread with us, was crucified by us, rose again in forgiveness and love and light, and said, make all people disciples. Now, of what? Of what? Of the church? But what does that mean? You know, I suspect if you're looking at a cosmic principle, you're looking at the spirit of the cosmos taking shape, then what we mean by church is very, very different to what most people mean by church. Certainly for Swedenborg, who I know a little, that would have meant an epoch of consciousness. It wouldn't have meant buildings. A church is a particular way people think at a particular time. That strikes me as very, very close to what the apostles were getting at. So there was live transmission from people who had met a God-man, a man-God, both ways round, and the apostles are trying as hard as they can to say what that was like. You know, it disturbs them, it excites them. They're not having easy times. I mean, people that think they're just dreamy hippies, you know, stoned out of their heads, and why not? Again, they're not following the textual materials of the time, as sparse as they are, I admit it, but it's not true that they're not there. There are some. And they're having difficulty with all of this. They're not having an easy time. What does it all mean? What does it all mean? This great thing, what does it all mean? And it's their mystery schools, arguably, debatably, that begin to write these things down under the name of Matthew, under the name of Mark, under the name of Luke, under the name of John. Therefore, the chronology, to a certain extent, isn't really as interesting as people think. And the chronology is basically bouncing about all over the place anyway. I mean, the Gospel of Mark, that was my favorite one recently. I mean, that was the first written, and that was about 20 to 30 years after that event. And you get the skeptics instantly jumping on it. What can you remember after 30 years? Well, I'm sorry your memory's so bad, but actually I can remember quite a great deal. You know, and also if I've been telling those stories to my students for 30 years and being questioned about those stories and trying to get everything in my head straight, and then looking at the other guy's account to try and get my head straight, I think you can actually cover a great deal of mileage, a great deal of ground doing that. You know, the synoptic gospels are a synopsis of each other. They don't all say the same things. That for me validates their authenticity, their power. It doesn't take it away. Hey, that's not what I remember. I don't remember that happening at all. Oh no, that's not what happened. What happened was, that's what you find in the synoptics. And of course, the mystical Gospel of John, was he a Gnostic? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Oh, right. I should Coco St. John, right?
Well, it's quite esoteric. Excuse me, quite esoteric, John's one, I think.
Oh, deeply, Debbie. I mean, some people have said it's not meant to be taken as history. I mean, the beauty of the Abrahamic stream is it normally does have 4 layers to it, 4 layers of meaning. So you get the philosophical, you get the historical, you get the philosophical, you get the metaphysical, then you get the mystical. And to this day, I mean, that's practiced in rabbinical school. I mean, you know, it's really discouraged that anyone starts studying Kabbalah until they're middle-aged and they're settled. You know, they're settled into their own lives. But you know, in the full and certain knowledge that these things are so powerful and so beautiful. Yes, it will unhinge you, and you'll start rushing around the world like a mad idealist or Madame Alexandra David-Neel. You know, so I mean, oh, shut up. You know, that's fun as well, yeah. But you know, I think they're erring on the side of caution is rather important, because some people won't be able to handle that. Some people will, some people won't. Yeah, so
well, some people like the historical, some people want to go a bit deeper, don't they? Which is why I think they're in that order, isn't it? You know, and if it rings true, I mean, for you, then you will go further with it. If you just want, you know, some people just want the basics and get the main meaning from it, you know, be good, love God, love your neighbor, blah blah blah, where others want to work harder.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I actually think all 4 levels are contained in each of the Gospels. And they're either from the physician or the working man. You know, that the perspective says what, you know, they all have the 4 levels, but from a particular angle, a particular person that was telling his students what it had meant. So I think that's roughly what you're looking at. I mean, I also wish people would read what comes next, like Acts of the Apostles, because it's really revolutionary. I mean, are the Christians of those days saying, unlike now, primitive now, compared to what was said in the past, are they saying that our good Lord is going to come back any second? No, they're not. What they actually say is the Holy Spirit. In other words, the community of righteousness comes next. Oh, now anyone who's interested in libertarianism and socialism should instantly be wetting their lips, because are there rich people in those communities? Yes. If a poor person has a need for something in those communities, they approach the apostles, and the apostles ask the rich people to give it to them. Whole fortunes were laid at the feet of the apostles, because everything was shared, everything was communitarian. Everything was for the good. I mean, the kibbutzim grew out of that, 1,000 years later. Everything was for the good of what makes us human beings in community together, without, this is the ideal, of course, without impinging on your freedom as a human being. And people probably forget, Ananias, was it Sapphira and Ananias actually get struck by lightning for holding goods back and pretending that, that they weren't there. Yeah. So, I mean, is that meant to be taken literally? I don't know. I don't think it needs to be taken literally for the full electrical power of that story to become very aware, very present. And the fact, how seriously that community, what they'd have been called the Jesus family, the Jesus followers, they'd have generated what they call Q text. Is it true that nothing can be said about the sayings of Jesus whatsoever? Well, that depends if you believe in supercomputers and linguistic reconstruction or not. I believe in it to a certain extent, because if you look at the Gospels and the secondary materials, the tertiary materials of that time, you can isolate a series of sayings and aphorisms that seem to come from a single wisdom teacher. Scholars call that the Q text. And of course, there's a big argument about how reliable that is, and right, is it uniform? But the point is, it can be done.
Let me ask you, what do you think of the Didache then?
Oh, I mean, I don't give the Didache spiritual, don't give it religious status. It's an absolutely vital book, an advisor, an insight into what people are doing and saying and how they formed opinions. It tells us a huge amount about the fathers of the church, yada, yada, yada. But these things are meant to be guides. They're not meant to be the Gospels. And right. The minute people give them a Gospel status, they've actually failed to understand what the writers were doing. I mean, the church fathers get a bad rap nowadays. I mean, they were doing their best in a Rome that was persecuting them and trying to murder everybody. One of the, I can't remember the name, and I can't remember which church father it was. When it became fun to round up Christians and murder them in public, like any other dissident in the empire, I'm not saying we're anything special, but they took special delight in killing us. I mean, there was one in particular where a serving girl had converted to Christianity, and what the Romans, that wonderful, wonderful, ruthless empire. What they decided, I mean, let's not get too carried away with ancient Rome. They used to make slaves who were friends, particularly because they were friends, kill each other. And the loser would get a sword or a shaft with a skull's head made of metal pushed down the side of his shoulder. So you had the living head and the skull's head staring at each other.
Oh dear.
And that was considered great fun. And it would get a huge round of applause in the amphitheater. But let's not, it's not about feeding Christians to lions, although let's not underplay that. That is horrific. If you've got a mother fighting for her children in an arena against lions, and that used to get a round of applause as well. Let's not get too carried away. I mean, the best one was when they used to put furniture of metal, in this particular case a chair, heat it on a bonfire, and then with big sticks push people into it and hold them down to sit in it. So they were burning on the outside, their flesh on the outside, and they were scorching at the same time, to show the power of the empire. Let's not get carried away by the beauties of ancient Rome. Let's remember.
Barbarism.
Well,
barbaric bastards.
Yeah, save your love for Roman for me. I mean, I love holidays in Italy with the best of them. They can do with ice cream what nobody can do unless you're Turkish. I mean, it's lovely, but let's not forget what empires do to the human psyche. They make you ruthless. They don't make you a nice person. They make you ruthless, and that was a military empire built to serve a ruthless elite. It wasn't a kind, caring, sharing, let's spread education across the world. That isn't what it was based on. It was based on money and ruthless power, like most other empires. The British Empire, let's not hide from it. I mean, that saw itself as the new Rome, and we were as bad. But that is a different conversation.
Well, we've got to make sure that doesn't come in the future. I'm going to bring us to an end, if that's all right, David, because it was been wonderful.
Have I answered your question?
You have indeed, but I wanted to ask you, because the word is important, obviously, and you are a poet yourself, and you have a few performances, or you've been doing a few performances lately. Are you still doing some through the summer?
Yeah, I mean, they keep asking me back. My God, what's wrong with them? I mean, a dear friend of mine, Dave Sears, is putting on what he calls the Oval Tavern Sessions. He was in a rock group with my dear friend Paul Obertelli. That I can't remember what the rock group was. I do know the contract was on its way to them as they all got stoned and drunk and had a big row and split up. I do know that, and that's not rock history. That's actually what happened. Shame on you. Right.
So that's rock and roll.
Yeah, but right, they'd all be millionaires now. But apart from that, Dave, they're still involved in music. Dave is an impresario in his own right. I believe he's lead guitar, and most of it's musical. But what he's trying to do is make these sessions cultural. So they invited me, I suppose, because they wanted some poets involved. I take poetry very seriously. If you're a poet and you don't love the word, then to my mind, you're not really a poet. You're something else. I'm not saying you're nothing, but you're not a poet. And you might be an artist of a different form, and you might be a singer, and you might be a dancer, but you're not a poet. The magic of the word for poetry is actually, for a poet, the word is magical in every sense of that word. A poet is a medium in every sense of that word. A poet performs because magic happens in every sense of that phrase. So they asked me a couple of sessions ago, a couple of months ago, and to my horror, they wanted me to go back. I've been there 3 times so far, and the swines, they've not had enough yet. They've invited me back on the 7th of next month to give some new material. I gave some new material last time, and it was working out well for me. I'm just about to submit my 4th collection. So it's giving me a chance to see, not that I'd necessarily change it, but it's nice to see how people react to perform poetry. I'm not the sort of poet whereby you sit down and read with a cup of cocoa. That's not me. I'm the sort where you have to, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. I'm nothing wrong, boring, but nothing. And I'm the sort where you have to, wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Where you have to get into it. You have to seek the muse, and the muse has to be invited to the stage. So it's giving me a chance to test out some of this new stuff. And if anybody's interested in joining us, the Oval Tavern Croydon, please don't get it muddled with the other Oval Tavern. Oval Tavern Sessions. I will put links on my Facebook and LinkedIn lines, feeds, and the more the merrier. It's a bit of fun. Drink heavily and as much as you want, because it's not meant to be. It's not a meeting of clergy. Although I do wear my collar because I think it makes me look endearing. But have
also,
some fun.
Which is important. So people, please do go and listen to David's poetry. But there's also the conference in October, so let's give that a little plug as well, because I think your early birds are finishing soon for tickets, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, tempus fugit. It waits for no man. Time moves on. We're beginning to move tickets much more effectively. People are beginning to realize what a unique gathering it is, what a unique event it is. A meeting of people that would never meet together and never discuss these things, with polar opposite views, who are coming together to discuss human origins, the truth, whatever that is, aliens, whatever that is, the paranormal, archaeology, not only the mainstream type, but the experimental type. Early bird tickets, if you want to save yourself a couple of quid, are finishing in the next week or so. We're doing quite well at that. We won't be reinstating that. Save a couple of quid, book now. Hey, if it doesn't come off and World War III breaks out, you get a refund. It's built into the system. But let's say that doesn't happen, and let's say it's a go ahead, and let's say we all meet for an incredible day. Breaking boundaries and sharing each other's perspectives on the 29th of October at David-Neel College for a real day of refreshments. I don't want to make it a military operation, of book signings, of new friends, of absolutely astonishing insights. Some of the things I've heard that the speakers are going to say for the first time at that conference are mind-blowing.
And we best say what the conference is called. It's
Nephilim. Sorry, no, you after me, Debbie. Nephilim Anthropology Conference UK.
And then you can find your tickets there. And I'm going. It'd be great to see all you guys there as well. So, David, I want to really thank you for your words on this show we've done on the mystery of the word. I look forward to our next show soon. And I'd like to thank everybody for listening and watching. And I hope you've all got lots of new words to think about. So once again, I thank you, David. I'm going to end the show. Peace to everybody.